Desperate Duck in Diamond Disaster. Desperate Duck likes nothing better than to start the day with a large crusty beef pie for breakfast, and then perhaps one or two after that to help it down. But this morning, he was eating more beef pies than usual. "Thanks, Aunt Maggie," said Desperate Duck after he had scoffed the lot, for Maggie was the only person in the world who knew the secret recipe for Duck's beef pie. Desperate Duck reckoned it was time he showed his appreciation to Aunt Maggie for all the beef pies she'd made for him over the years. "This thought to do with me," he said, as he emptied his life savings out of a metal rhinoceros bank, but especially, piggy banks were much too soft for Duck. Then, he marched down to the Cactus Town Jewelers. He knew that Maggie had always wanted a beautiful shiny diamond ring. Unfortunately, the diamond rings there were very expensive. "And I've only got 50 cents," sighed Desperate Duck. Aunt Maggie deserved the best. But what could Desperate Duck do? "I've got it," he said. "I'm going to look for diamonds out in the hills." So Desperate Duck went to buy his diamond hunting gear from the general store. "You'll need a shovel, a pickaxe, dynamite, a donkey, food, a stove, a torch, a map, a diamond spotter's book, and you're going to get some sweet cup of tea as well," advised the shopkeeper. "Why's that?" asked Desperate Duck. "For the shock in case. Do you find a diamond?" As soon as Desperate Duck had loaded all the supplies onto his donkey. "There you go, little fellow," he said. But the poor thing couldn't take all the weight, and Desperate Duck did hate to see it suffer. "This won't do at all, partner," said Desperate Duck, and before long, the supplies were well on their way to the hills with Desperate Duck carrying them, and the donkey on his back. "Are you okay back there?" he asked. The donkey grunted happily. This did make a change for him. When Desperate Duck got to the hills, he laid out his equipment. "Let's see now," he said. "These rocks look promising," and with that, he whacked at them with his pickaxe to see if there were diamonds inside. Meanwhile, 2 whole miles away, there was a strict chaos at the fort of the 7th Cavalry Troopers. "Man your posts, everyone," screamed the General Cactusheed. "We're under attack." They weren't, of course. The stones raining down on them were the chippings from Desperate Duck's rocks. "How about in here?" wondered Desperate Duck, standing at the entrance of the cave. "It's probably an old, abandoned diamond mine. There's sure to be diamonds in there." Desperate Duck entered the cave and saw something shining around just ahead. "Well, what did I say?" said Desperate Duck excitingly by his find. "I've struck gold, I mean, diamonds. Aunt Maggie is going to love her diamond ring." But things weren't quite what they seemed. A deafening thump echoed around the whole cave, then Desperate Duck stumbled out. "Ha! No diamonds after all." Following Desperate Duck was out of the cave. It was the Texas Express, chugging along onto the tracks as best it could after crash into Desperate Duck. Duck had mistaken the railway tunnel for a cave, and the lights that he'd seen were the lights of the train. But Desperate Duck was more determined than ever to find a dazzling diamond for Aunt Maggie. "Maybe I'll have more luck at the base of this mountain," said Desperate Duck, digging more furiously. "Hoo-hee. This sure is a hard work," he groaned, but he mopped his brow and carried on digging. "Well, I'll be darned," said Desperate Duck when he stopped and saw what had happened. The big galleon galoot had dug so hard that he'd moved the mountain half a mile east. "Darn nuisance. That's all I can say," grumbled the owner of the Cactus Mountain View Hotel, because there was no longer a mountain to view. He'd have to think of a new name for the hotel. The Pony Express rider also had reason to grumble. "Phew. Where'd this great thing come from? He gasped as Desperate Duck's new mountain towered above him. It's totally blocking my trail. I'm going to need a mountain goat to get over that tower of trouble. But Desperate Duck didn't stop there. He carried right on, until he found the perishers. Darn tooting. I've got one. I've found one of the perishers. Desperate Duck jumped for joy at his discovery. This just has to be the biggest shooting rooting diamond I've ever seen. But it was a little bit grubby. Desperate Duck polished it on his chin. Yup. I'll get this dazzler as good as new in no time. As Desperate Duck rubbed the stone, bits of the diamond fell away like grains of salt until there was nothing left but a pile of dust. A diamond may be the hardest thing around, but it just couldn't handle the stubble on Desperate Duck's chin. Desperate Duck was furious. Suffering succotash, gemstones grotto ash. I had it right there in my mitts, and now it's gone again, he bellowed. All the brown rabbits 4 miles around show out of their burrows. They thought the commotion was an earthquake. Desperate Duck was downright depressed. When he got home, Aunt Maggie landed a loving soggy kiss on his cheek. Jeepers creepers, Aunt Maggie, said Desperate Duck. What's come over you? Your face, of course. The diamond had shoved Desperate Duck clean for the first time since he was 2 weeks old. How thoughtful of you. Finally, I can kiss my favorite nephew without scratching my face. Boy, that did Desperate Duck blush. He thought he didn't have anything to thank Maggie with, but he'd given her what she'd always wanted. What a close shave.